2 Kings 10 Massacre of Ahab's Descendants. Now Ahab had 70 sons in Samaria, so Jehu wrote letters and sent them to Samaria, to the rulers of the city, to the elders and to the guardians of the sons of Ahab, saying, Now then, as soon as this letter comes to you, seeing your master's sons are with you, and they are with you chariots and horses, fortified cities also and weapons, select the best and the fittest of your master's sons and set them on his father's throne and fight for your master's house. But they were exceedingly afraid and said, Behold, the 2 kings could not stand before him. How then can we stand? So he who was over the palace and he who was over the city, together with the elders and the guardians, sent to Jehu, saying, We are your servants, and we will do all that you bid us. We will not make any one king. Do whatever is good in your eyes. Then he wrote to them a second letter, saying, If you are on my side, and if you are ready to obey me, take the heads of your master's servants and come to me at Jezreel tomorrow at this time. Now the king's sons, 70 persons, were with the great men of the city who were bringing them up. And when the letter came to them, they took the king's sons and slew them, 70 persons, and put their head in baskets and sent them to him at Jezreel. When the messenger came and told him, They have brought the head of the king's sons, he said, Lay them in 2 heaps at the entrance of the gate until morning. Then in the morning, when he went out, he stood and said to all the people, You are innocent. It was I who conspired against my master and slew him. But who struck down all these? Know then that there shall not fall to the earth nothing of the word of the Lord, which the Lord spoke concerning the house of Ahab, for the Lord has done what he said by his servant Elijah. So Jehu slew all that remained of the house of Ahab in Jezreel, all his great men and his familiar friends and his priests, until he left none remaining. Then he set out and went to Samaria. On the way he was at Beth-Eked of the shepherds. Jehu met the kinsmen of Ahaziah, king of Judah, and said, Who are you? And they answered, We are the kinsmen of Ahaziah, and we came down to visit the loyal princes and the sons of the queen mother. He said, Take them alive. And they took them alive and slew them at the pit of Beth-Eked, 42 persons, and he spared none of them. And when he departed from there, he met Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, coming to meet him, and he greeted him and said to him, Is your heart true to mine as mine is to yours? And Jehonadab answered, It is. Jehu said, If it is, give me your hand. So he gave him his hand, and Jehu took him up with him into the chariot, and he said, Come with me and see my zeal for the Lord. So he had him ride in his chariot. And when he came to Samaria, he slew all the remained to Ahab in Samaria, till he wiped them out according to the word of the Lord, which he spoke to Elijah. Slaughter of worshippers of Baal. Then Jehu assembled all the people and said to them, Ahab served Baal a little, but Jehu will serve him much. Now therefore call to me all the prophets of the Baal, all his worshippers and all his priests. Let none be missing, for I have a great sacrifice to offer to Baal. Whoever is missing shall not live. But Jehu did it with cunning in order to destroy the worshippers of Baal. And Jehu ordered, Sanctify a solemn assembly for Baal. So they proclaimed it. And when Jehu sent throughout all Israel, and all the worshippers of Baal came, so that there was not a man left who did not come. And they entered the house of Baal, and the house of Baal was filled from one end to the other. He said to him who was in charge of the wardrobe, Bring out the vestments for all worshippers of Baal. So he brought out the vestments for them. Then Jehu went into the house of Baal with Jehonadab, the son of Rechab, and he said to the worshippers of Baal, Search and see that there is no servant of the Lord here among you, but only the worshippers of Baal. Then he went in to offer sacrifices and burnt offerings. Now Jehu had stationed 80 men outside and said, The man who allows any of those who come into your hands to escape shall forfeit his life. So as soon as he made an end of offering the burnt offering, Jehu said to the guard and to the officers, "Go in and slay them, let not a man escape." So when they put them to the sword, the guard and the officers cast them out and went into the inner room of the house of Baal, and they brought out the pillar that was in the house of Baal and burned it. And they demolished the pillar of Baal and demolished the house of Baal and made it a latrine to this day. Thus Jehu wiped out Baal from Israel. But Jehu did not turn aside from the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin, the golden calves that were in Bethel and in Dan. And the Lord said to Jehu, "Because you have done well in carrying out what is right in my eyes, and have done to the house of Ahab according to all that was in my heart, your sons of the 4th generation shall sit on the throne of Israel." But Jehu was not careful to walk in the law of the Lord, the God of Israel, with all his heart. He did not turn from the sins of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin. Death of Jehu. In those days, the Lord began to cut off parts of Israel. Hazael defeated them throughout the territory of Israel, from the Jordan eastward, all the land of Gilead and Gadites, and the Reubenites and the Manassites, from Aror, which is by the valley of Arnon, that is Gilead and Bashan. Now the rest of the acts of Jehu and all that he did, and all his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? So Jehu slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Jehoahaz his son reigned in his stead. This time that Jehu reigned over Israel in Samaria was 28 years. 2 Kings 11. Atalia reigns over Judah. Now when Atalia, the mother of Ahaziah, saw that her son was dead, she arose and destroyed all the royal family. But Jehosheba, the daughter of King Joram, sister of Ahaziah, took Joash, the son of Ahaziah, and stole him away from them, from among the king's sons who were with him, to be slain. And she put him and his nurse in a bedchamber. Thus she hid him from Atalia, so that he was not slain. And he remained with her 6 years, hid in the house of the Lord, which Atalia reigned over the land. Jehoiada anoints the king Joash. But in the 7th year, Jehoiada sent and bought the captains of the Karites and of the guards, and had them come to him in the house of the Lord. And he made a covenant with them, and put them under the oath in the house of the Lord. And he showed them the king's son. And he commanded them, "This is the thing that you shall do. 1/3 of you, those who come off duty on the Sabbath and guard the king's house, another third being at the gate Sur, and the third gate at the behind the guards, shall guard the palace. And the 2 divisions of you which come on duty in force on the Sabbath and guard the house of the Lord shall surround the king, each with his weapon in his hand. And whoever approaches the ranks is to be slain. Be with the king when he goes out and when he comes in." The captains did accordingly to all that Jehoiada the priest commanded, and each bought his men who were to go off duty on the Sabbath, with those who were to come on duty on the Sabbath, and came to Jehoiada the priest. And the priest delivered to the captains the spears and the shields that has been King David's, which were in the house of the Lord. And the guards stood, every man with his weapon in the hand, from the south side of the house to the north side of the house, around the altar and the house. Then he brought out the king's son, and put the crown upon him, and gave him the testimony. And they proclaimed him king, and anointed him. And they clapped their hands and said, "Long live the king." Death of Atalia. When Atalia heard the noise of the guard and of the people, she went into the house of the Lord to the people. And when she looked, there was a king standing by the pillar, according to the custom, and the captains and the trumpeters beside the king, and all the people of the land rejoicing and blowing trumpets. And Atalia rent her clothes and cried, "Treason, treason!" Then Jehoiada the priest commanded the captains who were sent over the army, "Bring her out between the ranks, and slay with the sword anyone who follows her." For the priest said, "Let her not be slain in the house of the Lord." So they laid hands on her, and she went through the horses' entrance to the king's house, and there she was slain. And Jehoiada made a covenant between the Lord and the king, and the people, and they all should be the Lord's people, and also between the king and the people. Then all the people of the land went to the house of Baal and tore it down, his altars and his images they broke into pieces, and they slew Mathan the priest of Baal before the altars. And the priests posted watchmen over the house of the Lord. And he took the captains, the Kerites, the guards, and all the people of the land, and they brought the king down from the house of the Lord, marching through the gate of the guards to the king's house. Then he took his seat on the throne of the kings. So all the people of the land rejoiced, and the city was quiet after Atalia has been slain with the sword at the king's house. Joash was 7 years old when he began to reign. 2 Kings 12. The temple repaired. In the 7th year of Jehoash began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Zibiah of Beersheba, and Jehoash did what was right in the eyes of the Lord all his days, because Jehoiada the priest instructed him. Nevertheless, the high priests were not taken away. The people continued to sacrifice and burn incense on the high places. Joash said to the priests, "All the money of the holy things which is brought into the house of the Lord, the money for which each man is assessed, the money from the assessment of persons, and the money which a man's heart prompts him to bring into the house of the Lord, let the priests take each from his acquaintance, and let them repair the house wherever any need of repairs is discovered." And by the 23rd year of King Jehoash, the priests had made no repairs on the house. Therefore King Jehoash summoned Jehoiada the priest and the other priests and said to them, "Why are you not repairing the house? Now therefore take no money from your acquaintances, but hand it over for the repair of the house." So the priests agreed that they should take no more money from the people, and that they should not repair the house. Then Jehoiada the priest took a chest, bored a hole in the lid of it, and set it beside the altar on the right hand, as one entered the house of the Lord. And the priests who guarded the threshold put it in all the money that was brought into the house of God. And whenever they saw that there was much money in the chest, the king's secretary and the high priest came up, and they counted and tied up in bags the money that was found in the house of the Lord. Then they would give the money that was weighed out in the hands of the workmen who had the oversight of the house of the Lord, and they paid it out to the carpenters and the builders who worked upon the house of the Lord, and to the masons and the stone cutters, as well as to buy timber and quarried stones for making repairs on the house of the Lord, and for any outlay upon the repairs of the house. But they were not made for the house of the Lord basins of silver, snuffers, bowls, trumpets, or any vessel of gold or of silver from the money that was brought into the house of the Lord, for that was given to the workmen who were repairing the house of the Lord with it. And they did not ask an accounting from the men into whose hand they delivered the money to pay out to the workmen, for they dealt honestly. The money from the guilt offerings and the money from the sin offerings was not brought into the house of the Lord. It belonged to the priests. Hazael threatens Jerusalem. At that time, Hazael, king of Syria, went up and fought against Gath and took it. But when Hazael set his face to go up against Jerusalem, Joash, king of Judah, took all the 5 gifts that Jehoshaphat and Jehoram and Azariah his fathers, the kings of Judah, has dedicated, and his own votive gifts, and all the gold that was found in the treasures of the house of the Lord and of the king's house, and sent them to Hazael, king of Syria. Then Hazael went away from Jerusalem. Death of Joash. Now the rest of the acts of Joash and all that he did, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Judah? His servants rose and made a conspiracy and slew Joash in the house of Millo on the way that goes down to Silla. It was Josachar, the son of Shimeath, and Jehosabad, the son of Shomer, his servants, who struck him down so that he died. And they buried him with his fathers in the city of David, and Amaziah his son reigned in his stead. 2 Kings 13. Joahaz reigns over Israel. In the 23rd years of Joash, the son of Azahiah, king of Judah, Joahaz, the son of Jehu, began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 17 years. He did what was evil in the sight of the Lord, and followed the sons of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, which he made Israel to sin. He did not depart from them, and the anger of the Lord was kindled against Israel, and he gave them continually into the hand of Hazael, king of Syria, and into the hands of Ben-Hadad, son of Hazael. Then Jehoahaz besought the Lord, and the Lord hearkened to him, for he saw the oppression of Israel, how the kings of Syria oppressed them. Therefore the Lord gave Israel a Saviour, so that they escaped from the hands of Syrians, and the people of Israel dwelt in their homes as formerly. Nevertheless, they did not depart from the sins of the house of Jeroboam, which he made Israel to sin, but walked in them, and Asherah also remained in Samaria. For there was not left to Jehoahaz an army of more than 50 horsemen, and 10 chariots, and 10,000 footmen, for the king of Syria had destroyed them, and made them like the dust at threshing. Now the rest of the acts of Jehoahaz, and all that he did, and his might, are they not written in the book of the Chronicles of the king of Israel? So Jehoahaz slept with his fathers, and they buried him in Samaria, and Joash his son reigned in his stead. Joash reigns over Israel. In the 37th year of Joash, king of Judah, Jehoash and son of Jehoahaz began to reign over Israel in Samaria, and he reigned 16 years. He also did what was evil in the sight of the Lord. He did not depart from all the sins of Jeroboam the son of Nebat, which he had made Israel to sin, but he walked in them. Now the rest of the acts of Joash, and all that he did, and the might with which he fought against Amaziah king of Judah, are they not written in the book of Chronicles of the king of Israel? So Joash slept with his fathers, and Jeroboam sat upon his throne, and Joash was buried in Samaria with the kings of Israel. Death of Elisha. Now when Elisha had fallen sick with his illness of which he was to die, Joash king of Israel went down to him and wept before him, crying, my father, the chariots of Israel and its horsemen. And Elisha said to him, take a bow and arrows. So he took a bow and arrows. Then he said to the king of Israel, draw the bow. And he drew it, and Elisha laid his hands upon the king. He said, open the window eastwards, and he opened it. Then Elisha said, shoot, and he shot. And he said, the Lord's arrow of victory, the arrow of victory over Syria, for you shall fight the Syrians in Aphek until you have made an end of them. And he said, take the arrows, and he took them. And he said to the king of Israel, strike the ground with them. And he struck 3 times and stopped. Then the man of God was angry with him and said, you should have struck 5 or 6 times, then you would have struck down Syria until you made an end of it. But now you will strike down Syria only 3 times. So Elisha died, and they buried him. Now the bands of Moab used to invade the land in the spring of the year. And as a man was being buried, lo, a marauding band was seen, and the man was cast into the grave of Elisha. And as soon as the man touched the bones of Elisha, he revived and stood on his feet. Israel recaptures a city from Aram. Now Hazael, king of Syria, oppressed Israel all the days of Jehoahaz, and the Lord was gracious to them and had compassion on them, and he turned towards them because of his covenant with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and would not destroy them, nor has he cast them from his presence until now. When Hazael, king of Syria, died, Ben-Hadad, his son, became king in his stead. Then Joash, the king of Jehoahaz, took again from Ben-Hadad, the son of Hazael, the cities which he had taken from Jehoahaz, his father, in war. 3 times Joash defeated him and recovered the city of Israel.